welcome back. Oh man, I am so excited for today's show. Along with doing the show and working with a number of writers, I also volunteer to work with a number of veterans. And we've been doing that for almost 2 years now. One night, about a month ago, a new veteran walked into the group. I could not stop listening to what this man had to say. I'm going to give you a little hint. We have a photo of that veteran. I'm going to put that photo up. There he is, looking exactly the way he does now, sort of. 19 years old. His name is Anthony Rabasco. Today, he is a 90-year-old veteran.
91-year-old.
91-year-old Korean veteran. Please meet Anthony Rabasco. Bosco, what a pleasure to have you here.
Yes, my name is Anthony Rabasco. I was born in Mount Vernon, and my parents came from Italy. They were immigrants. And I went to elementary school, junior high school, and evidently our folks were immigrants, and they didn't believe in their children having summer vacations. So my mother was a young boy. I used to work on a horse and wagon with delivering ice, 10 cents, 50 cents, 20, and I had to walk up 2-3 flights of stairs. Later, my mom got me a job delivering newspapers, and she had to post a $25 bond, and I had 132 customers. After I did my paper route, I used to work in a deli, and I used to wash the cases, pack the cases with the soda and beer, and I used to peel potatoes, and we used to make German potato salad.
Oh, wow. I love German.
Later on, I was cutting grass with different gardeners, and then finally we converted our house from coal to oil, and 2 brothers, the Wallman brothers, they came to my house and they put a new boiler in. And I was so excited to see them wiring the boiler, and I asked them for a job. So they hired me, and they paid me 65 cents an hour.
Wow.
As a helper, and my job was watch the tools. We carried the material in and out the job site. Later, when I went to junior high school, I finally went to electrical trade school, Edison High School, where I learned electrical trade. And later on, I was going to school down 149th Street and Southern Boulevard and 14th Street, Delahanty Institute. And I got my master's license. I was 22 years old. I graduated in 1947. When I got out of high school, on August 18th, 1948, I signed myself with the 101st Signal Battalion. And I was in pole line construction, and our jobs was to climb poles with gaffs, and we would throw beanbags at one another, one pole to another pole, and if you dropped the beanbag, you went down the pole and climbed back up again.
Wow.
But for physical ed, they had 6 men with ice tongs carrying the poles the length of a football field, and we had to turn around, come back, and I said, well, I'm going to get out of this. So evidently, I went into teletype. I got out of that, and I went into Amtrak radio. Amtrak radio, what it is all about, if you had a field phone, you crank it, I could talk to you from wire to wire. Now, you're on the other side of the mountain, there's no wire between you and I. That telephone conversation would go into a central switchboard, and the switchboard was to a carrier unit and be transmitted through the air. That's where I would be, on top of a mountain ridge. Then it would go down into another carrier unit, be demodulated. You pick up the phone, I'd be talking to you. When I made the Incheon landing, in Korea, we went for 3 weeks to school in Tokyo in 1951, January 51, and when we left Tokyo, we were put on a ship, and then we went onto a landing barge off the ship in the middle of the ocean made the Incheon landing. I slept in an abandoned freight car. I was assigned to the 24th Infantry Division. I supplied radio communications for the 24th Infantry in Seoul. We moved to the north central part of Korea. I supplied radio communications for the 1st Marine Division on the Han River during the winter months around February, March. I supplied radio communications for the 19th Turkish Brigade, and I also supplied radio communications for the 6th Rock Infantry Division. So the way the line moved, I kept moving with the line. Evidently, we were pushed up and down 3 times. And each unit was on the line. I supplied radio communications. Evidently, during the month May, April, May, the Chinese broke through the lines, and we retreated over 30 miles. We regrouped, and we went back up the front lines. At that time, it was in the English, it was the Commonwealth and the 6th Rock Infantry Division were on the front lines when the Chinese broke through the lines. The winter was treacherous. Evidently, we slept on top of the ice and snow with our sleeping bag. Our sleeping bag, I speak to the cadets at West Point, and I tell them the type of clothing we had. I talked about the type of boots that we had. We had double buckle leather boots, and our sleeping bag was a canvas with an army blanket inserted inside. It was not made for that frigid weather. We had long johns, and on top of the long johns we had woolen pants, and on top of the woolen pants we had field pants to be water repellent. So it was during that winter months. The winter was treacherous. Actually, the river froze total, and trucks would go across that riverbed. That's how cold it was. It was frigid weather. During the monsoon rains, we would wash our socks in our helmet and put it in our waistband. And with our body heat, we would dry out our socks. If I took a bath 5 times in 1 year, it was a lot. But aside from that, my wife and I, about 20 years ago, I sent my documentation into the Korean government. The Korean government gave my wife and I 5 days free lodging. We went to Korea, and when I arrived in Korea, I met a young boy. He was about 40 years old. He taught history to the 5th and 6th grade students in Portland, Oregon. His mother was an Army nurse. He said, "We'd like to hear from you, veterans." And I said, when I get back to the United States, I'd be glad to write something for you. So I wrote an 8 by 10 page, and I mailed it to him. Then he writes back to me, he says, "There's more to it." So I wrote another 2 pages. Then my son says, "Pop, your punctuations are no good." And I redone, and I wrote the story about the Memoirs of a Lone Soldier, about myself. Then I met the Turkish soldiers. I said to the interpreter, I supplied radio communications for the 19th Turkish Brigade. He was so happy. He kissed me on this cheek, he kissed me on this other cheek. Then he handed a veteran pin, and he pinned it on my lapel. I also met a colonel from the United Kingdom. And I said to the colonel, "Colonel, there's something stuck in my mind. I didn't know where it was." So I described it to him. I said there was a mountain with a pass. I said there was a river running alongside the pass with a railroad, and we had 3 tiers of barbed wire all down along the riverbed with 50-gallon drums and napalm bombs, and we had anti-personnel mines all along the riverbed. The Chinese came over the top with mules, and evidently we recovered about a dozen mules. I had 2 mules. One was an American mule, which had U.S. on his hindquarters. It was very vicious. The other mule, she was very gentle. She had a big tumor on her hindquarters. I was able to put 5 gallons of water on her back, and she would take it up to the ridge. We had them for about 2 weeks. Then they made a caravan, and they took them south. Because that particular incident, the Army engineers threw pontoons down the far end of the riverbed, and they were floated up against the pontoons, the Chinese soldiers, and with a backhoe machine, they came and buried the dead. And the reason why they buried the dead, the human body had a stench which blew through the mountainside. It was unbearable. It smelled like rotten eggs. One second.
So now, so you were involved in combat. You were not just a Korean veteran. You are a Korean combat veteran.
Now, you picture this area here as an ammo dump. Now, we had 50-gallon drums stacked 3 tiers high. We set fire thousands and thousands of gallons of gasoline. Oh. We set fire to vehicles that needed minor repair. We took 50-gallon drums of gasoline and we poured them in all the wells to contaminate the water so the Chinese would not drink the water. The Army engineers used to throw the fire hoses into the riverbed. The water was total green. It was steam jetting the water into a vapor and it condensed be crystal clear. And then they put hammer tablets into the water, and then we drank the water. We fetched the water with either a Lister bag or a water trailer, which tastes like iodine.
Now, were you ever wounded in any of these battles?
Well, no. I had both of my feet frozen in the sleeping bag. Matter of fact, my shoulder, I have a big egg on the shoulder, my right shoulder that was exposed out of the sleeping bag, that I have arthritis all the way down. My fingers are out of proportion now because of the arthritis, and I had my feet frozen inside the bag. During the month of, say, around July, we were finally giving airbags that we slept on top of it, which were much comfortable. And then what happened, I was flown to Japan into the hospital because I had malaria. But while I was in the hospital, there was a tall fellow going in and out the hospital with a crutches. And I said to the young boy, I said, let me go to town for once, because the only thing I had was the green garment they issued in the hospital. So I went to town, and the orderly, which was the male nurse, reported me to the doctor that I was not in my bed. Because of that, the following morning, the doctor walked into the hospital, and he comes up to my bed. He says, "Soldier, I see you feeling much better." And within 3 days, he put me on the plane back to the front lines, and I spent another winter. If I would have played it cool, I think I would have came back to the States. I had 34 points. I was eligible to go on rotation back to the States. Every month you get 4 points on being on the front lines. I left Korea from Kumwon, which was the Iron Triangle. My cousin wrote me a letter, and she said, my husband just arrived in Korea, Gene Joyce. Evidently, Gene, I went to school with him. He said, "Pat, how long have you been here?" I said, "Well, Gene, I have enough points to come home for rotation." And he said, "Oh, boy," he said, "I just arrived." And I spent another hard winter there. We had 3 men to a radio team. And one of the fellows that were on my radio team, Paul Jackson, he came from Ohio. And my wife said to me, "When are we going to go see him?" So I wrote a letter, and I went to visit him. And he moved to Arizona, and then he took us to the Grand Canyon. He took us all the way, and he showed where John Wayne made the movies and so forth. Then my friend Charlie Tenoy, he was a Japanese-American boy, and evidently he was in Hawaii. My wife and I went twice to visit him, and he took us to an old crater in Hawaii, and there was 2 huge plaques of all the islands in the Pacific. And then Charlie and I, we reminisce where we were in Korea, how we got pushed up and down, how we regrouped. I didn't know where Korea was on the map until I came home. At that time, we had television. We didn't have television. We had just the radio and the newspaper. And and Charlie and I, we reminisce how we went up and down into Korea. Charlie passed away. Paul passed away. And my friend Kenny Clinchy, who wasn't for him, I think the Chinese would have captured me. Wow. He was one jump ahead of me, and we retreated over 30 some odd miles, walking and sleeping at the same time. My radio transmitter weighed 55 pounds, plus my weapon, plus my field pack. The straps would cut me in the shoulders, and I would alternate my hands from left to right to take the pressure off my walking and sleeping at the same time. In the meantime, the 6th Rock Infantry had laborers who were peasants. They would carry their equipment, their gear, and they would fall out of rank with fatigue. They would butt them with their rifles. They would get on their feet. So as we retreated south in Korea, and
you received a medal.
Yes.
In fact, several medals. Yes. I'd like to call attention to a plaque that Mr. Rabasco brought in with him today. And one of those has a blue ribbon.
Yes.
Talk to me about that blue ribbon.
Yes, I was awarded 4 Bronze Stars. I didn't know how I earned them until I came home. Evidently, each unit that was on the front lines, they were awarded the Bronze Star, and I was awarded with that particular unit. Also, I was awarded the Presidential Unit Citation. About 2 years ago, I was on a flight to Washington, D.C., and evidently, as the tour guide was a woman, and she says, we're going to leave the World War II Memorial, we're going to go visit the Korean Memorial, and you're going to see the Korean soldiers in ponchos. So I said to the young girl, I said, do you know what the poncho is? She says, oh yes, it's a rain gear. And I said, no. We used it, we laid it on the ground, and we slept on top of it with our sleeping bag. We used it as a raincoat. We used it as a lean-to tent. We used it as to carry the wounded, and we used it to fetch water. Oh, she says, I'm going to relay that to the next group.
Yeah.
In the meantime, I went into the hospital. When I came home to the States, I couldn't pull myself together. I was in the hospital. At the hospital, it took me 3 years to sleep indoors. Wow. I slept in an open porch. My mother said, you're going to freeze. I said, no, I'm not going to freeze.
It was like a heat wave compared to what you were used to, right?
Yes, and evidently, and now they call it post-traumatic distress. Several years, about 5 years ago, I had an infection in my ear, and I went down to the VA hospital, and the young girl says, Mr. Rabasco, you need a new ID card. And I said to the young girl, I have one. I showed it to her. She says, no, that's obsolete. Because the old ID card used to have a picture and a Social Security on the face of the card. And she says, you go upstairs right now, the young girl's going to take your picture. So I met the young girl and I said, you see my old ID card? She says, yes. You see my picture? Yes. I want the writing printed on the new ID card. Oh, she says, you are service connected? I said, you see the shoes I got on? Uncle Sam gives me these shoes. She says, right after I take your picture, you're going to go upstairs and talk to the contact man. So I went to see the contact man, and he says, next week I'll make an appointment with the medical doctor. 2 weeks goes by, I get a letter through the mail, I want you to have x-rays taken. 2 weeks goes by, I get a letter through the mail, I want you to be reevaluated by another medical doctor. A month went by, and I get a folder, an 8x10 folder through the mail, and all of a sudden I go see the contact man, and I said, what is this figure? Oh, he said, yes, son, you're going to receive that through the mail. I said, holy smokes. I said, that's more than my Social Security. Evidently, they're mailing me a check for $1,886 every month.
It was well earned.
Our rations consisted of 3-in-1 rations. It was very difficult for us to get our rations. We would get, for the unit that we supplied radio communications for, they would give us a case of rations per man, and we called 3-in-1 rations. It would consist of like 3 Del Monte tomato sauce cans. One we call a dry good can, consists of 2 breaded crackers, powdered milk, powdered coffee, and a dab of jelly. The second can can be sliced peaches, sliced pears, or fruit cocktail. The third can could be corned beef hash, Frankenberger spaghetti, or 2 hamburger patties in that little can. We used to take the dry good can, scoop up the soil, crimp the corner in, put gasoline in it, and that's how we made a sterno. I don't know what it is to eat a hot meal. In 14 months, I was in combat.
Wow.
I ate out of frozen cans. Every ration we got 1 napkin. That napkin you had to save. That napkin was your toilet paper.
Wow.
I wore the same underwear for 14 months while I was in combat.
Oh my goodness.
So when I talk to the cadets at West Point, it's an honor to speak to them. They give you a beautiful certificate of appreciation.
It's their honor.
They give you a card with their name on it, and they also eat 20 minutes with them in the mess hall. It's an honor. Our chapter was invited to go to Fox Meadow School to speak to a young group of boys and girls. I was very unhappy. See, the young girls, they came in with flip-flops on their feet, their stomach exposed, and they were going to Washington, D.C. to see the World War II Memorial and the Korean Memorial. I spoke to them for 1 hour, but I was very unhappy. I tell the cadets, every boy and girl in the United States should serve at least 18 months in the military service. When I went to Israel, all the girls and boys served in the military. They don't appreciate what a soldier does for their country. So evidently, the peasants, the Korean people were hard working people. They walked for miles and miles in caravans, only with what they had on them. The winter was frigid. Their homes were grass huts. They had a fireplace at one end and a tunnel underneath the floor and a chimney on the opposite side. That's the way they would heat the houses. One day I went down to the village and there was crevices in the ground alongside, and the ground was all dirt, clay, and I dug it up with a shovel, and what they did, they took huge crocks of rice and they buried it underneath the soil, and they put a stone over it. When the monsoon rains came, it fermented and pushed the soil up out of the ground. One day, I heard a cow echoing through the mountainside. I put my field glasses on, I looked down the mountainside, and I didn't see no movement. When I went down the foot of the mountain, the cow was inside the hut, pegged in the center, and walking around. There was corn stalks all the way around that she was feeding off. They hid the cow, thinking he coming back to the villages. One day I heard a woman moaning and groaning, and she was on a cot, and she had a cowhide covered over herself. But they abandoned the village, and she left her behind. I assume she passed away there because the weather was frigid, very frigid. One day, I was on top of the mountain ridge, and all of a sudden I saw a fellow say, "Boys, come over here, come over here." I didn't recognize who he was. Evidently, I think he was a priest or a deacon. And he said to us, "Boys, would you like to receive Mass?" Of course, we all said yes. He said, "Remember, boys, there's no such thing. You pray the way you want to pray. Remember, there's no such thing that you cannot eat meat on Friday. You don't know today's your last meal." I don't remember how he came up on top of that mountain, how he got up. Evidently, the mountains were in meters. We were up 1,150 meters, 950 meters. The cloud used to sit on top of the mountain like a heavy blanket. The dampness used to eat you up alive. One morning, the sentry was wiping off his weapon. He touched the trigger housing, and a few bursts ran off. Everybody jumps out of the foxhole. You have a luminous badge. I have a luminous badge. I can see you in the dark. You can see me in the dark. And they talked back and forth with one another, the Korean soldiers, that it was an accident. That morning, the sergeant called the private in front of half a dozen soldiers, told him to bend down to touch his ankle. With a huge stick, he whipped him several times for punishment. He sent them down the mountain 2 or 3 times to fetch water, and each 5-gallon water weighed about 45 pounds.
Wow.
45 pounds. Water was very scarce. And one day, a peasant was plowing the fields with an oxen with a huge stone, and he was behind the oxen. He said, "Hoi, hoi!" and the oxen would draw the stone and pull. I said, "Let me do it, pal. Let me get on." So I got behind the oxen, and I said, "Hoi, hoi!" And he didn't mean budge. He didn't recognize my voice. So these are things I observed while I was in combat.
Mr. Rabasco,
Yes,
you, before we began the show,
yes.
were concerned about whether you would have enough information to share with us. We have 1 minute left. In this minute, I want to say to you, on behalf of all the people of America, thank you for what you have given us. We cannot thank you enough.
Well, the good Lord was fortunate. He took me home.
Yes, he did.
And I'm very happy to share this with you and other people, and I'd be glad to talk to anybody who's interested. And
well, we will be sharing this show with all of our listeners for sure. We also have a 1-hour special that we have created out of a DVD that you gave me. We're going to be airing that on this station over and over again so that people all over can understand the sacrifice that you made for us and what you've given us.
I tell my sons, I have 2 of my boys who are in the military service. My son Paul was a captain in the Marine Corps. He speaks Russian fluently.
Wow.
My other son, his brother, who's a twin, Peter, he was lieutenant commander on the destroyer. And I tell my sons that there's 2 types of veterans. There's a veteran and a combat veteran. A lot of veterans say they're Korean veterans, but they lie. They're not veterans. They are veterans, but
Combat
not
veterans.
combat veterans.
Well, you today have had the opportunity to meet a combat veteran and an amazing man. I wish we had time to talk about your skill as an electrician and all of the other things. Unfortunately, we have run out of time.
I've been an electrician over 65 years.
Wow.
I'm now electrical inspector. I've been in the electrical trade over 65 years. I enjoy what I'm doing as an inspector.
Thank you so much for being here today.
And
thank you for sharing this.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, and thank you for what you've given to our country. Freedom is never